Welcome, and here we are in the last chapter that we are covering before the end of the semester, which is chapter 15 in the core textbook about inflation, unemployment, and monetary policy. Apologies, you may hear my cat in the background. So, key ideas this chapter goes into, and it is another very long one, are looking at the connections between inflation and unemployment, policy and inflation versus unemployment, the notion of an inflation stabilizing rate of unemployment, monetary policy and aggregate demand. And if we think back to the very beginning of the semester, monetary policy is usually referring to interest rates or the money supply, external shocks and the equilibrium price level, and central banks and what is sometimes called independence. We're definitely not going to talk about all of these things. If it were a normal semester, we might go there, but it's not, so I'm limiting it to what I think is most important as takeaways. So a key question that this chapter is set up to answer is what the link is between unemployment and inflation and how those are related to politics. So broadly speaking, if we think about the sorts of policies that reduce unemployment, we're thinking about policies that encourage spending. So any policy that's going to encourage spending should hopefully increase GDP. And this should likewise lead to an increase in employment. The idea here from the previous two chapters that we've talked about is that any spending is going to be earned by someone else in an economy. For a firm to increase production to keep up with demand, they're going to have to hire more workers, more people are going to earn, and that's going to have good effects for the economy, both in terms of spending and income, but also translate into more employment. Now, the reverse of this are policies that are supposed to reduce inflation. So any policy that reduces GDP should hopefully depress inflation. And inflation here is change in the price level. So just as a reminder, when I use a triangle symbol, that's the Greek delta. And we think about change in inflation as a percentage change in the price level overall. Broadly speaking, we expect expansionary policies to be more politically popular than contractionary policies. So anything that's going to reduce unemployment is going to be more popular than anything designed to reduce inflation. What is the problem with inflation? Well, apart from the sort of visceral response we might have to an increase in the price level, we can think about inflation on a few different levels. First, we can think about the effect of inflation on borrowers and on lenders. Now, borrowers, we assume, are going to benefit from inflation. If your debt is denominated, written out in dollars, you are effectively paying the nominal value of your debt. The real value of your debt refers to the actual purchasing power of the dollars your debt is denominated in. So if I owe $1,000 and I'm paying it over a period of 2 years, but prices increase over time, then the actual purchasing power of that $1,000 by the end of the term of my debt is less than it is at the start. So I effectively get more in return for what I borrowed than what I'm actually giving back to the bank at the end, even accounting for interest that I'm paying on it. When we think about buying power, we think here about the more obvious effect of inflation, which is to say it decreases buying power, all else equal. If prices rise by 25%, then $100 is going to buy 25% less stuff. And then finally, we think about inflation in the context of hyperinflation, where we have a change in the price level overall greater than 10%. So when we start talking about double digits inflation, we're talking about hyperinflation, which has all sorts of costs associated with it that we're just going to ignore for now. Where does inflation come from? Well, inflation can come from any number of things, but a central topic in macroeconomics in the 20th century has been the connection between bargaining power and the price level. So specifically, when we think about the effect of workers lobbying for higher wages or the effect of a change in employment on the price level, we're thinking about the effects on wages. So what happens to prices if workers successfully argue for an increase in wages? Well, we expect an increase in the aggregate price level. Essentially, as the cost of production rises, and wages are a cost of production, because they are the price of labor, then we're going to expect firms to raise the prices they charge for their output in order to maintain profit levels. Now note that for this to be an economy-wide thing, we had to have widespread successful lobbying for higher wages. A successful bargaining session to raise wages at one firm should not lead to an overall increase in the price level. Now, the second thing we want to think about is the firm level dynamic. How does a change in competition affect the overall price level? Well, we tend to expect that an increase in competition for employers or firms will decrease the price level. And the reverse should be true. If there's consolidation in a market, if monopoly power increases in a particular market, then we are going to expect prices as a whole to increase because firms can get away with it. So this is the story about cable companies merging together and raising prices because you just don't have anywhere else to go. So it's slightly more firm specific or industry specific, but if this is an industry that is widely used by people or socially necessary, such as the provision of internet, it can definitely have societal inflationary effects. So I'm going to end here for now, and the next slide is going to take back over.